I'm delighted to be here with Pippa Bagnall, part 3 of our interview with you, just before we head off to Australia, and a really exciting new role in healthcare there in one of the big states working for the government. We've been talking a lot about health, leadership and so on. I wanted to talk a little bit for people who are watching this, and they might be a manager, they might be a chief executive, they might be a pop star, they might be a coach, they might be a speaker, all sorts of. I think leadership takes so many different forms.
Yeah.
Somebody who is a parent, in a way, is very much a leader. I remember when we were talking the other day, you spoke a little bit about one of the things that's really important is knowing what you yourself are about as a leader, and following opportunities when they emerge. No doubt, when you are a leader, you're going to find yourself in all sorts of situations. You talked a little bit about being in a cabinet office thing, and you're going to be in an environment with all sorts of people. There's going to be all sorts of challenges, things that you may be able to change, some things that you may not be able to change, all sorts of stuff. What's your take on knowing what you're about? Do you need? I think you said something the other day that hinted that you've got to kind of know what you're about before before anything else. Once you are in that leadership stratosphere, so to speak.
Interesting. As a parent. I've had to think about what my values are in terms of bringing up my children. And I think that forced me to think about those values, whereas before I hadn't really had to think about them, I was just going along with them. So I spent a lot of time thinking about what's important, what do I think are the principles upon which one should sort of lead one's life. And I think for me the most important thing is to be honest about what you feel about things. And if you're in a situation or an environment where you feel those principles and those values are compromised, then you need to think about moving out of it. Yeah. If you can't change that, then you need to take some kind of control of the situation, because I have worked in situations where I felt totally compromised, not just about values and principles, but about what I can deliver. And if you're working for an organisation or an individual that stifles your own personality and your own capability, then you need to really try and extract yourself from that situation. I would say, as a piece of advice, don't fight it, because you're not going to change the people that are making life difficult for you. What you've got to do is to make life right for you. And that's easy to say and harder to do, but you have to have the courage to do that. And on several occasions I've done that. And I've put myself in situations where I haven't known quite what my security will be going forwards. But those are some of the best decisions I have ever made. And this is a really important point, and I think, again, the other day you touched on something. You said, that there are all these different kind of drivers, if we're honest, isn't it? There are sometimes the drivers of, moving and advancing your career, particularly at early days. Then you talked about, then very often if you have got a particular career, it's actually, obviously there's that thing about sustaining yourself and one's lifestyle, whatever one's lifestyle is. And then you talked about at certain points, particularly if somebody happens to be a parent or has dependents, then you've got all these different kind of pressures as well as the pressures within that role. And I guess this is the thing about knowing who it is that you are is really important. I mean, for me as a coach, I think it's number one. If I'm coaching or working with anybody who is a leader in any way, shape or form, I'm keen first of all to find out who are they, what are they about, why is it they lead, what are their drivers, and to reflect it back to them that they're very aware, because I think it's really important that one finds out what one's own magic is, and are you in the right setting. And I think you point to that, because sometimes one could be in a setting where one may be adding value, but one may not have been able to look at that, because maybe you're not quite in your best space. I was with somebody just the other day, and this guy happens to work in the field of sport and has got lots of connections in sports, and we're working on his business. He wants to do business, and he's a father and all these things, but I quizzed him more. What would you ideally be wanting to do? How do you want this to look? And there's all sorts of things he was really wanting to influence, and I drew to his attention, look, this is what you're actually about. If you work and articulate from this space, people will be arrested by what you're saying. If you don't, there's something about your voice that's not going to ever reverberate as powerfully as it could be. So that's my take on this thing about leadership. I think it's very important for one to go on that journey, and one might find oneself in the wilderness, and we were talking about this the other day, in that. I mean, would you... without wishing to sound like this is an advertisement, I have to say that I would not be making this move to Australia if I hadn't had your style of life coaching.
That's kind.
Because all of those things you've just said made me concentrate on me. And I'd been through quite a lot of changes and was trying to work out where I wanted to take life.
Mm.
And I think to take stock and to really understand what excites you, what you really are, who you really are, what you want to achieve, I think we're not very good at doing that. And so to have time where you push me in a very nice way to say, well, what if this is about you? And I think very often if you've grown up and you've had a family or you've had a great career, you can lose sight of what's really important to you. And I don't see myself as a leader that has to lead because I like leading. I like to see results.
Well, you put your finger on something very important. I think that lots of leaders, particularly if somebody like yourself, and I meet a number of leaders, and there's another leader in this particular book, lovely person, lovely spirit, who's running a particular business, but also has political things that they're passionate about within the country that they're originally from. Sometimes when you're caring about others, one's own health and well-being can sometimes be compromised if one doesn't take that time out, isn't it? So it's so important for that leader to ensure that they take that time and that they make sure that they're supported, nourished, that they get the rest and the support they need. Otherwise, nothing is sustainable. You cannot make that impact that you're wanting. But I think you're right. I think also sometimes you just don't find that core of what you're actually about to be able to lead in the right environment and in that way. And it does take, I think, takes a huge amount of courage, isn't it?
Well, you're so true. You're so right, because when I was working full-time, bringing up children and doing a master's degree, I ended up getting pneumonia and becoming very sick. And that was, quite a long time ago now, but I hadn't appreciated how important it was to look at what you're doing with life, what you're achieving, how you're achieving it, what support you've got, and why are you doing it. That's probably the most important thing, is why. Yeah,
that why. I think that's a really important thing. I wonder if, before we close, to maybe leave some points for people who are either leading or they're on that journey. For somebody who perhaps is in a situation early on in their career, and perhaps others have recognised, they begin to recognise that maybe they could go for that management job or something else. Any just general tips there, and they're a little bit nervous about it, or they're just unsure of themselves? Any useful tips?
Okay, I think the first thing I'd say is make sure you've got somebody who's your coach. It might be a parent, it might be a best friend, it might be somebody who is working for an organisation that you respect. But test out your ambitions with somebody, because when you're young and a little bit insecure, you need encouragement to take steps that you feel are frightening, challenging, but potentially very exciting. So I'd say make sure you've got somebody who's helping you. I think the second thing is, I would say definitely, if you see something that excites you and interests you, explore it, exploit it, talk to people, put yourself forward, say you want to do this job. You might only be in your early 20s, but go out there and say to people, this is what I really am interested in doing. It takes courage, but even in my later years in my career, I've still maintained that's a really important thing to do, which is to make yourself known to people that this is what you are and this is what you want to do. So network, I think, is really important. So you've got the coach, the network. And I think the third thing I would say is constantly think about your own personal development. I think we can learn throughout life. I think we can develop throughout life. And I shall be doing some things to prepare myself for my new job in Australia, because I've constantly got things that I need to develop and enhance. So I think we are individuals, we're human beings, we've got lots to give. So put yourself in a position where you're going to be able to give everything that you've got and get some satisfaction out of what you're achieving. And
that's wonderful advice. And finally, for those people who perhaps are in leadership positions at the moment, and I think this can sometimes be a tricky area, isn't it? You can find yourself in leadership and find that your own values or whatever, either they haven't been able to be explored, or that they can be being compromised consciously, and you're either very aware of it or you're not. For somebody who's being arrested by some of the things that you're saying, struck by the things, or they touch the heart, how can a leader go on that journey of leading far more from the heart? I'm a big fan of Nelson Mandela. It's interesting. You can start. I think there's a wonderful metaphor there. We can often start out fighting And then if one's really wanting to affect change, one really needs to understand deeply the human condition,
Yes.
and deeply and empathetically, and to really bring people with you, all the things that you were saying. If somebody's really wanting to lead from the heart, obviously, is an exceptional in,
Yes.
in so many different ways. But what are the things for somebody who's in that leadership position? Because they might be a manager in an organisation, they might be a chief executive, they might be somebody in banking or finance or all sorts of different sectors, because there's so many sectors at the moment that are under scrutiny, from politics to finance to healthcare to business. What kind of leaders is that we want? If somebody's thinking, what's your feeling about that journey that they need to go on? Because I know you've been on that journey yourself and had to ask yourself those kind of questions. What kind of things do you think they should be asking themselves or looking at?
I think they need to look at, well, there are two things I would say. I would say never be confrontational. Always try and structure an approach to a situation which you're not happy with in a very thought through. So I do lead from the heart, but I use my mind as well,
That's right.
which is to say, what's going on, why am I upset about it, or why is it not feeling correct? And rather than going into a situation where you take on the problem, you try and offer a solution to the problem through your best thought through ways, and using some of your emotional intelligence, as opposed to thinking that you can take on a fight and win, particularly if you're in a junior position. And I think senior leaders really respect somebody who come and say, I'm not feeling great about this, I think this is what could make it better, and I think this is what I could deliver as a result. Are you prepared to...
I think you raise a really important point, because I think one of the things that we don't encourage enough is, I always think, encouraging people to manage one level up, one down, to be able to challenge the leader quiz safely, in a very, as you say, in a very thought through and well, hang on, what about this? What about for those people who perhaps are in a more senior position? Because some people who can be isolated or have challenges and so. What about those people who are on that journey or could be on that journey? Or I
think you put a huge amount of pressure on our senior leaders, and it's quite cutthroat that we can say, well, if you don't sort this out, your job is gone, and they're off and they're gone and they're embarrassed and professionally ruined. I think it goes back to the point about coaching, allies, working the people that you need to work with for the right reasons. Yeah. And it's about, if say a chief executive in the NHS had a responsibility and they were going to go into the millions in debt or in loss, then they need to go out there and openly say, right, who's going to help me with this? Rather than waiting for somebody to say, well, you're no good at that job, so we'll bring somebody else in. And they'll have the same problem. But actually, if you've done the best of your intentions and it's going wrong, say so and look for help. Yeah,
I think you're right, and I think it's so important for somebody to do, and sometimes obviously, let's hope that for many people it's not necessarily going to necessarily be as pronounced as in your case, but that sometimes for some leaders, and many leaders actually think, actually, am I best placed in politics? Do I actually really want to be leading somewhere else in business? Am I best placed here? Could I actually be doing something actually over here? Or, where is it that I often liken it to different plants and the different gardens. Where is it that I actually will best flourish? I was with someone just the other day, and they were at a point of career transition, and coaching them, helping them to look at actually their magic actually is all brought together on this and this here. I think that's really, really an important point, isn't it? Because otherwise one's not going to really be able to affect that change, and for oneself, for one's loved ones, and for the community or whatever constituency the one's actually trying to serve.
I think that we're all going to make mistakes in our career moves. Partly because there's an awful lot of unknown when you take on a new role, and I think we have to be true to ourselves that sometimes you are in the wrong place. You're not going to affect the change that you feel you can affect. And I think it's tough because, of course, we live off our salaries in order to have some security in our lives. But sometimes you have to take a long, hard look and say, this is not quite right. What am I going to do to manage the situation? and take control of it rather than the situation controlling you.
I really like that, and I think that might be a wonderful point for us to just wrap it up. I just want to thank you very much for this interview. I want to thank you for all the work that you've done. I know, and I bet you lots of people who you've worked with, actually. I don't know how often you hear. I'm sure you probably hear it quite a lot. But to thank you, because I guess lots of people who are in leadership positions don't necessarily always hear that thanks. Sometimes you're going to be in a different room to the constituency. But I just want to thank you on those people that in different ways who I know you've helped. I really want to wish you all the best with Australia. It sounds like an extraordinary opportunity. Do stay in touch by the powers of things like scope.
Will. And thank you for all your support and help.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I'm really grateful, and you're a great coach.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say. Well, thank you very much. I'm going to leave you to smile, so turn off the camera, and thank you very much.
Okay.
Enjoy Australia.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.